They all smiled and laughed the day I was cast out of the family, treating me like I was nothing. They didn't see the quiet fire I was starting, the life I was secretly building while they bragged and schemed, thinking their games had won. My name is Vanessa, and for as long as I can remember, my family measured my worth by their convenience. I was the obedient daughter, the one who stayed silent when secrets were whispered, the one who forgave too easily. I thought love meant loyalty, even when it hurt. That mistake nearly destroyed me. It started with my sister Claire. She always had a way of twisting the truth into her favor. I trusted her like blood and bone, but the day she revealed her true colors, I realized trust in this family was a weapon, not a gift. She accused me of betrayal, of trying to sabotage her life, of being jealous of her every success. Her voice was sharp, precise, like a blade cutting through any doubt, and every word landed as if the family had been waiting for permission to believe her. And they did. My parents, the very people who should have defended me, nodded in quiet agreement. They believed Claire's story, and I was suddenly the villain in my own home. I remember standing in the living room, my suitcase at my feet, the weight of disbelief pressing down on me. My father's eyes avoided mine, my mother's face a mask of sorrow carefully practiced to hide suspicion. I said nothing. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. Because I had learned long ago that anger and tears meant nothing here. I walked out that day, not because I had no heart left, but because I refused to fight in a house that had already declared me dead to them. The world outside was harsh, but honest in ways my family never was. I found a tiny apartment above a coffee shop, a place with leaky pipes and a view of the city skyline that looked like a promise. I worked long hours at a boutique law firm, answering phones, filing endless paperwork, making myself invisible while learning everything I could. Every rejection, every late night, every moment of exhaustion was a brick in the foundation I was secretly building. I wasn't just surviving, I was becoming unstoppable. The first year was the hardest. Nights were the loneliest, and the memory of betrayal burned like an ember I couldn't put out. Claire's face haunted me in dreams, her smug smile a reminder of everything I had lost. But instead of breaking me, it sharpened me. I started reading everything I could about finance, about property, about influence. I learned how the world really worked, how people manipulated power and wealth without anyone noticing. Knowledge became my weapon, patience my ally, and strategy my closest friend. While I was learning, my family continued their predictable dance of arrogance and complacency. Claire flaunted her lifestyle on social media, every post a reminder of how they believed they had won. My parents hosted parties, attended charity events, whispered behind closed doors about how my absence had simplified things. They never imagined that I was quietly watching, tracking, learning, and planning every move I would eventually make. Every bit of their overconfidence was a seed for the downfall I would one day harvest. I discovered the truth about the betrayal piece by piece. Claire had stolen from the family business, embezzling funds and blaming me in the process. My parents had covered for her, thinking that their reputation mattered more than justice. It wasn't just unfair. It was a crime, and it was the kind of mistake people like me never let go unanswered. The world had rules that my family ignored, and I intended to use those rules against them. By the second year, I was no longer invisible. I had built contacts, small investments, and enough influence to make people notice me, though I stayed under the radar. I learned how to maneuver through corporate structures, how to make decisions quietly, how to plant ideas in the minds of powerful people without revealing my presence. I became a shadow in a world where visibility was often mistaken for power, and in the shadows, I learned how to thrive. There were moments when doubt crept in, when I wondered if I would ever truly reclaim what was taken from me. But then I remembered the way Claire laughed as I left, the way my parents didn't lift a finger, and the fire inside me roared louder. I couldn't waste time on bitterness. Bitterness is heavy. Revenge is precise. I focused not on the hurt, but on the outcome. Every decision, every investment, every strategic move was a step closer to the day I would no longer be ignored. By the third year, I had quietly acquired small stakes in businesses my family never imagined I would touch. I had developed a reputation for being cunning, sharp, and surprisingly influential, though most of it was still hidden behind a facade of simplicity. When I reappeared at family events, I was no longer the naive Vanessa who had left with tears in her eyes. I was calm, confident, and untouchable in ways they would only understand too late. And now, as I plan the moves that will make my family realize the mistake they made in casting me out, I feel a strange satisfaction. Not just the thrill of revenge, though that is part of it, but the satisfaction of knowing that loyalty and cunning, when combined, create a power no one can ignore. They may have laughed at me once, but soon they will understand the quiet storm that grows in the lives of those they underestimate. This is only the beginning. The quiet fire I started that day I walked out is now a blaze that cannot be extinguished. And when they finally look up from their petty schemes and realize the force they dismissed, they will see me standing, not as the betrayed sister, not as the ignored daughter, but as the one who holds the strings they never knew existed. I am ready. The game has changed, and I've been playing while they slept. Vanessa had learned long ago that power was most dangerous when invisible. By the time her family thought she was still struggling in her small apartment, she had quietly woven herself into circles they never suspected she would touch. Each dinner, each gathering, each casual meeting they attended, unaware that the world outside their gilded walls was shifting in her favor, she watched and waited. Her revenge wouldn't be loud. It wouldn't be messy in public. It would be precise, silent, and irreversible. The first target was Claire. Vanessa knew her sister's weakness: pride. Claire thrived on recognition, on admiration, and on the illusion of control. She flaunted her acquisitions, her social connections, her little empire of influence built on the family's wealth and reputation. But Vanessa had learned to read the fine lines beneath the surface: the nervous glance, the overplayed confidence, the cracks masked by laughter. She studied Claire relentlessly, noting who she trusted, who feared her, and who secretly doubted her authority. Every observation became a weapon, every detail a clue in the strategy that would soon unfold. Vanessa began planting the seeds carefully. She made anonymous tips to Claire's business associates, highlighting small financial discrepancies she had quietly uncovered. Not enough to cause panic, not yet, but enough to sow doubt. In parallel, Vanessa acquired subtle influence over key stakeholders in Claire's ventures, purchasing minor shares that gave her insight and leverage. No one suspected Vanessa, not even Claire, who remained consumed by vanity and her illusion of control. Vanessa also knew the importance of timing. Patience had been her ally from the beginning, and she refused to rush. Every meeting she attended, every deal she monitored, she waited for the perfect moment when Claire's arrogance would make her overreach. She allowed Claire to believe she was untouchable, feeding her sister's ego until it became the very trap that would undo her. Watching her in action, Vanessa sometimes felt a flicker of pity, but it was quickly replaced by the satisfaction that her careful planning was progressing exactly as intended. Meanwhile, Vanessa expanded her quiet empire. She acquired assets under assumed names, discreetly aligned herself with influential figures in finance and law, and established herself as a force her family could never imagine. It wasn't about wealth alone. It was about control, about positioning herself to strike where they thought they were safe. Every transaction, every quiet maneuver strengthened the foundation she would one day use to dismantle their lives, piece by piece. The day of her first indirect confrontation arrived unexpectedly. Claire had invited Vanessa's parents to a small celebration of a lucrative business deal, unaware that Vanessa had a seat at the edges of her influence. A phone call Vanessa had initiated months prior led to a minor shareholder questioning one of Claire's most prized acquisitions. Within hours, subtle cracks appeared in the polished presentation Claire had spent weeks preparing. Vanessa watched from afar, her calm expression betraying nothing as she observed the panic flicker across Claire's face. Her parents, oblivious to the origin of the disruption, were unsettled. Vanessa could see it in their eyes, the unease that had never been there when Claire had successfully manipulated them in the past. It was the first time they felt a hint of vulnerability, and though they didn't know why, Vanessa savored the shift. This wasn't revenge yet. It was the opening, the first move in a game they hadn't realized they were playing. Vanessa's nights were now spent coordinating multiple layers of influence: legal audits, minor regulatory inquiries, financial assessments, all orchestrated without anyone realizing she was behind them. Each thread she pulled tightened around Claire's ventures, and she kept meticulous notes of every reaction. Every doubt, every falter, Every hurried phone call was cataloged and added to the growing pattern that would become the final blow. But Vanessa didn't limit herself to Claire. Her parents had underestimated her from the beginning, and she intended to remind them what happens when loyalty is misjudged. She discovered through careful research that her father's prized investments were poorly managed, relying on advisors too complacent to notice minor discrepancies. Quietly, she began placing herself in positions to influence outcomes, creating pressure points that could be leveraged later. Her mother, ever protective of family reputation, was susceptible to social influence. Vanessa planted subtle suggestions through trusted intermediaries that would later force her mother into decisions that looked self-directed, but ultimately benefited Vanessa's plan. Despite the growing complexity, Vanessa remained unshakable. She had no need for confrontation, no desire for public spectacle. Her revenge would be surgical, a revelation so complete that it would leave her family stunned, not just by the outcomes, but by the realization that the person they dismissed was the one who orchestrated it all. Each step reinforced her patience. Each careful maneuver brought her closer to the day she would reveal the truth. Vanessa often reflected on how different this journey had made her. She was no longer the naive girl who believed love meant unquestioned loyalty. Betrayal had taught her to observe, to analyze, and to act with precision. Every setback, every slight, every smirk her family had directed at her had been logged in memory, transformed into strategy, and now worked to her advantage. What they had mistaken for weakness was the calm before a storm they could never weather. And still, she waited. Patience, she reminded herself, was as much a weapon as influence or intelligence. She didn't strike too early because timing was everything. Her family thought the moment had passed, that Vanessa had faded into obscurity, but she had merely become invisible. Invisible, yes, but unstoppable. They would learn in time that the woman they tried to erase had grown far beyond their imagining. The first cracks were showing, subtle, yet undeniable. A partner questioning a minor report, a shareholder confused by unexplained adjustments, Claire missing a key opportunity because of the pressure Vanessa had applied without ever revealing her hand. Vanessa smiled quietly, a thrill running through her that had nothing to do with vengeance for its own sake. This was the satisfaction of skill, of patience, of intelligence applied with precision. She wasn't just taking revenge, she was teaching a lesson her family would never forget. As Vanessa left the cafe that evening, walking past the bright lights of the city that had witnessed her transformation, she felt the rush of anticipation that only comes from knowing you are close to victory. Her plan was still unfolding, but the pieces were in place. The day of reckoning was approaching, and she would be ready. Her family might continue to laugh, to flaunt, to believe they were untouchable, but Vanessa had become a force they could never anticipate. This was the quiet storm before the final revelation. And when the moment came, they would understand that the person they dismissed, ignored, and betrayed was the one who had always been in control. Vanessa was patient, precise, and unstoppable. And the day they realized it would be the day her revenge became unforgettable. The day had finally arrived. Vanessa had spent years in the shadows, building her empire quietly, while her family basked in the illusion that they had won. Every missed opportunity, every overplayed confidence, every secret she had kept while observing them had led to this moment. Her heart raced not with fear, but with the thrill of inevitable triumph. The people who once laughed at her, who treated her like she was nothing, were about to see just how wrong they had been. Claire's empire was first to fall. Vanessa had been patient, allowing her sister's pride to blind her. The subtle pressure she had applied, the anonymous tips, the shareholder doubts, the perfectly timed audits, culminated in a single meeting where Claire's world unraveled. Investors questioned her decisions, regulators demanded explanations, and partners began to doubt her competence. Vanessa watched it unfold with an almost serene satisfaction, knowing she had orchestrated every move without ever revealing herself. Claire's confident smile faltered, then vanished entirely. For the first time, she was vulnerable, and Vanessa savored the quiet power of the moment. But the real victory was deeper than financial ruin. Vanessa had positioned herself to take control of the assets her family had once dismissed her from. Every company she had invested in quietly, every connection she had nurtured without fanfare, now gave her leverage she could wield openly. Her parents had no idea that the daughter they cast aside, had become the woman who held the strings to the life they believed they controlled. The revelation came at a family dinner, an event meant to celebrate Claire's perceived success. Vanessa arrived unannounced, calm, poised, and unrecognizable to anyone who had once underestimated her. She carried no anger in her eyes, only the quiet confidence of someone who had already won. As she walked into the room, the laughter faltered, the murmurs of conversation paused, and all eyes turned toward her. Her parents' expressions shifted from surprise to unease, and Claire's smug confidence cracked immediately. Vanessa spoke first, her voice calm but precise. "I see you've all been busy, celebrating what you think is your success. Funny how quickly appearances can deceive." She paused, letting the words sink in. The subtle tension in the room was almost tangible. Everyone knew something was different, but no one could yet place it. Vanessa continued, revealing the intricate web she had woven over the past 3 years: financial manipulations, strategic acquisitions, and the silent erosion of Claire's empire. Every revelation was backed by undeniable proof, delivered calmly, methodically, without a trace of rage. Claire's face paled as she realized the scope of Vanessa's reach. Every investor she had trusted had been influenced by Vanessa's quiet hand. Every partner whose loyalty she assumed was solid had been gently redirected. The empire Claire had thought untouchable was crumbling under the weight of Vanessa's invisible authority. She stumbled for words, but Vanessa's measured delivery left no room for excuses. Vanessa's parents were next. Their shock turned to panic as they began to understand how completely they had misjudged her. The investments they thought were secure were now partially controlled by Vanessa, and the legal structures they had ignored were subtly in her favor. The family they had cast out had become the force they could no longer challenge. Every dismissive glance, every whispered accusation from years ago returned to them now as a lesson in hubris. And then Vanessa revealed the final layer of her plan, the personal stakes that cut deeper than money or reputation. She had ensured that Claire's closest allies were aware of the betrayal, the embezzlement, and the lies. The social networks Claire had relied upon to bolster her confidence began to fracture under Vanessa's careful disclosure. Friends who once smiled at Claire now whispered in doubt, hesitant to continue loyalty to someone whose world was quietly collapsing. Vanessa had dismantled not just her sister's empire, but the illusion of control she had relied upon her entire life. As the room grew tense, Vanessa allowed herself a small, quiet smile. This was not the satisfaction of cruelty. It was the satisfaction of justice, of intelligence, of patience applied with precision. Her family, once the architects of her humiliation, now faced the consequences of their underestimation. Every laugh, every smirk, every dismissive glance they had thrown at her over the years had built the foundation for this moment. Claire tried to protest, her voice trembling, but Vanessa raised a hand, calm and commanding. "No words can undo what has been done. No arrogance can rewrite the truth. You believed I was weak, invisible, and powerless, but here I am, and the world sees exactly what you failed to recognize for so long." Her parents, humbled and shaken, could only nod, their authority shattered by the realization that their own child had surpassed them in every way that mattered. Vanessa's calm authority filled the room, unchallenged and absolute. The quiet storm she had become was undeniable, and the family who had cast her out had no choice but to witness it. By the end of the evening, Vanessa had not only reclaimed what had been taken from her, but had done so in a way that ensured her long-term influence remained secure. Claire's empire was weakened irreversibly. The parents' authority diminished permanently, and Vanessa stood as the undeniable force, respected, feared, and admired for her intelligence and restraint. No dramatic confrontation, no public spectacle, just the quiet, calculated dismantling of the world that had once rejected her. As Vanessa left the house that night, the city lights glimmered around her, reflecting the journey she had taken. She had been betrayed, underestimated, and cast aside, but none of that mattered anymore. She had built a life in the shadows, learned the rules of power, and executed a plan that would be remembered not for revenge alone, but for the brilliance of its strategy. Vanessa smiled, not with malice, but with the calm satisfaction of someone who had finally claimed her rightful place. The family who laughed at her once had learned a lesson they would never forget, and in that quiet triumph, Vanessa knew that patience, intelligence, and precision were far more powerful than any impulsive act of revenge. She had waited, She had planned, and she had won. The family betrayal that once left her broken had forged a woman unstoppable, a force unyielding, and a mind brilliant in execution. The game was over, and Vanessa had emerged not only victorious but untouchable, leaving behind a legacy of cunning and resilience that her family could never erase. If you think you've been underestimated or betrayed, remember, strength grows in silence. Subscribe now and join me as I uncover more stories of betrayal, revenge, and the shocking ways people rise above those who doubted them. Don't miss the next story. It's going to leave you speechless.